All right, and the last person we have needs no introduction. Well, I'll give him an introduction anyway. He's part of our own Coco for Bay Island. His name is Volker. You may have seen him before. I would consider him at this point a very dear friend in so many different volunteerships and things that we run the special interest group together on systemic coaching. He is a NLP expert. I would say he is a systemic constellations expert. He is also an executive coach and an anto coach, and has done amazing work from the stories I've heard from him say with the Canadian First Nations as well. So let's give Volker a nice warm welcome. And you ready? So let me share my screen. Where are you? Okay, there you are. Okay, ready, Volker?
I am ready.
Okay, here we go.
So thank you very much for having me. And I have recently taken the Polyvagal ideas and introduced more and more of my leadership coaching clients to actually paying attention to the nervous system. And mostly these come up when we're talking about leadership concerns like psychological safety on teams, or how do we encourage openness and transparency. During the pandemic, obviously, dealing with team members that are stressed out. And just generally, a lot of people are interested in creativity at work. And that requires that we're paying attention to two conversations that are happening simultaneously and all the time. We're trading words back and forth, written or verbal, and then our nervous systems are in conversation with each other at all times. We know what is going on for the other person at a nervous system level. And there comes along Stephen Porges and the polyvagal system that sort of creates a structure for our mind-body connection, and mostly pays attention to the autonomic nervous system, the one that we don't have any volitional control over, like digestion and heartbeat. And there's a sympathetic part of our autonomic nervous system that is all about activation, action, moving forward. And there's the parasympathetic side of that nervous system that is about rest and stillness. And when we are in a very safe place, the higher up in this diagram, the more safety in the space. We are likely in the ventral vagus. And that's where we feel safe, we have connection, we belong. Creativity thrives here, our minds wander. When we hang out with friends, we are often in that safe space. When we increase pressure in the situation, either by circumstance or because I'm the manager, we create activation. Now we have a hard time sitting still. It's the early start of fight and flight, where we get activated. And when we increase the pressure further, we get into freeze. We go numb, we dissociate. There's a sense of paralysis. We have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. When that lasts for a long time, we call it burnout or depression. And there's very low executive function accessible in the dorsal. Now, the interesting two-step in this is a continuum and not quite as structured. When we have a foot in our safe space and a foot in excitement and a foot in activation, that's where we play. Improv would be in that area. And here we have a combination of keeping access to our creative juices while splashing around with risk and having excitement, being engaged, having a challenge that we find interesting. It's a highly productive place we can be in. So as a manager, I want to create that space for others. Personally, I find it very interesting when we go all the way over into the parasympathetic, we tend to activate both our happy place and the darkest place. And they show up at the same time. And usually that happens when we go into meditation. And there, we slow our nervous system down enough where we start to notice all the safety patterns that keep running in the background, whether we need it or not. And that can be very confronting and uncomfortable and a great learning experience. There are a few principles around how we have this nervous system conversation. The first one is co-regulation. And that mostly states that we affect each other, we feel each other. And I can, when I am in a safer space than you are, I send out an invitation for you to join me in safety. Or when I am feeling threatened, I'm extending the invitation to notice that it's a dangerous place here. The second one is that in the continuum, we want to have as take incremental stepping stones. So when we encounter someone who feels utterly helpless, inviting them to take action, any action, is already a coaching move towards improvement. And the third one is just the general recognition that in addition to our perception, our cognitive perception, we can develop neuroception that lets us know what's actually happening in our nervous system. Where do I currently reside? And that's highly important for me as a coach to know where's my normal, how am I encountering people, and what are they reading me? What am I inviting them into? And am I lifting them up or am I making them aware of danger? So knowing myself is highly important. And then I can actually notice what is happening with me or for me in relationship. So I encounter someone that I don't know very well, and I very quickly either get more agitated or more safe and comfortable. And that lets me know something about their state and how to meet them. And in the office environment where we're not encountering many stray cats, the general move is towards safety. So how can I manage my own nervous system so that I encounter people from a safe place and I send out an invitation to feel safe? And as I mentioned earlier, in my ambition about how I can have an impact on the other, I look for incremental improvement. Is someone feeling threatened and getting overly focused? How can I create a little spaciousness so creativity and lateral thinking comes back in? And as a general reference, I highly recommend Deb Dana. She has a book called Polyvagal Exercises for Safety and Connection, which makes Stephen Porges' dome on the functioning of our nervous system much more practical and digestible. And I invite you to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
All right. Awesome. Beautiful presentation on polyvagal. And just a shout out, I just listened to Deb Dana's podcast on Sounds True. Really great. Check that out too. I'm a big fan of it. Any questions for Volker?
I have one. So you mentioned meditation as an exercise to kind of access where you are or to be able to feel those feelings. What other exercises do you recommend for kind of knowing where you are in your nervous system or being able to work through your nervous system?
For me, it's not improv. For me, it's acting. I had to sit on my hands earlier to not take over the conversation. And like improv, acting is an invitation to be myself in the moment, in an imaginary circumstance, and then to let myself alone, to allow myself just to be. And in ways that I had never expected, acting is both challenging me to step into situations that I, in normal life, never would be into, like screaming at someone or threatening to murder them or whatever craziness writers come up with. And then in that space, to find the place where I'm resting in myself and still resilient and responsive in the moment to just let it happen. And that level of, letting go, even though the words are prescribed, there's so much color and inflection and body language involved, that is like, it's very easy to spot Yeah, if I am in ventral, or if I'm freaking myself out about being on stage and having to perform or something, to the audience, that's just clear as day. So there's no hiding. And to do that in a social context, to not be able to hide in a social context, yeah, goes with improv or with Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, all of these environments create similar opportunities for us to just be. Yeah, Tom.
Hey, Volker. One of the many things I love about the Agile community is we embrace the kinds of concepts that you're talking about here. We love these things. I haven't been a part of a community professionally that embraces this kind of stuff like the Agile community does. And you're definitely on the forefront of really pushing the envelope. But one of the reasons why I'm glad to be retired is because this message it just seems to fall on deaf ears on the executives that really are the ones that need to hear it. And so when I hear Andrew say things like, he's tired of people, and a couple other folks have mentioned that, I am so relieved that I don't have to try to convince people to be decent human beings anymore when they've learned to be successul by being jerks, and they feel like they have to continue to do that. So here's my question. How the heck do you go in and coach people and make an impact? Do they listen? Are they receptive? Are you able to make progress with this?
The areas where that is easiest is if it follows on to a 360 feedback survey. And whatever ideas they have about their intentions and their ability as leaders, these 360 feedback surveys often are like a prick to a balloon. And there's an openness when they're looking at these written comments and the sense that, oh my God, yeah, my team members don't trust me. My peers, think I'm dominating meetings. And now they're suddenly confronted with comments that we don't get to hear very much. And recently I've experimented with essentially, like when we asked me to squeeze something into 7 minutes, I realized I've done this presentation on the fly with a bunch of senior leaders already, and it is doable. And to kind of condense it down and for them to start feeling both at what level of threat they're operating, when they're multitasking and they're overscheduling and the need to be in every decision, like how unkind they are to themselves and how that spills over to others. And so I have a combo message for them very often that if you want to know how you relate to yourself, look at a challenging relationship. The person that you can't stand or that you find triggering, you will still treat them better than you treat yourself. And if you want to have more even-keeled relationship, you got to start being a lot friendlier in your own relationship and your expectation of yourself. I mean, just today I had a long conversation about, how a senior leader feels always disappointed and her expectations aren't being met, and how to deal with these, lackluster employees. And I was like, just look in the mirror. Like, how much are you driving yourself for striving for perfection? And how harsh is the language when you're describing any one of your regrets or when things didn't go so well? I mean, it's obvious in her own language, how much she beats herself up. And then it becomes circular. And I am in a conversation where they really get that as I am working on myself, I am opening up new doors in my relationships to the people around me. And in that combination, I often get a lot of traction.
Brilliant. Love you, Volker.
Volker, this is Nate. Well, first of all, I have to applaud you. I'm assuming that you've done this before because you made the smoothest transition chart to chart here in this 20-second thing. It didn't seem like you were rushed at any point along the way. I don't know how.
I had a lot of conversations with my nervous system before I got started.
The other thing is you brought up some topics, like I heard we say Polyvagal many times, but I don't listen to him half the time. But you have excited me on that topic, and I'd like to learn more about that. I also recently have finished my NLP coaching practitioner certification, but I'm looking to take it further into more advanced and master's level. And we don't have to talk about it here, but I'd like to maybe touch base with you on how to. What would be some of your suggestions on individual readings here, and also organizations or even yourself that I could connect with to further integrate the NLP concepts in how I coach and teach along the way here?
I'd love the conversation. I put my email into the chat, and that's
okay.
I think I stopped going to NLP trainings 10 years ago after really being in it for like 5 or 6 as a teaching assistant and so forth. When you get me started, you might find it hard to shut me up again.
Do you have reservations in the training is why you did that, or?
No. It was just after 8 years. I mean, at some point it was time to just find something new.
Got it. Okay.
No, I think I'm extremely. I have high recommendations that I'm very confident about, and okay. We can talk about the subtleties of the various schools of thought.
Fantastic. Thank you.
As a bonus, Nate, I can recommend doing any form of NLP master practitioner. I've recently discovered that being a master practitioner allows me to put toddlers to sleep in under 5 minutes. Incredibly helpful.
Okay, so if you can give me your email or
trust Volker's opinion. Stay in touch with him. You'll be fine. Unless you have toddlers you want to have put to sleep, I'll see what I can do for you.
But you got a better beard than he does, so that's cool.
I love the point about co-regulation. I think that was something that was sparked when I was at the conference with many of you in California, which was amazing. So great job on that, everyone. But also just the idea that the presence of the coach or the presence of the people who are leading has this dramatic effect on the executives or on the teams or on that. So as coaches work on themselves, that's actually one of the most powerful ways to help the people around you. And it is why it's so important to keep bringing that to, as many of us have said on this call, a place where people are quite tough with each other. They beat themselves up quite. So us being a little bit gentler with ourselves and being able to radiate that and keep working on ourselves and bringing that is making the world a better place. I deeply appreciate that point, Volker.
And I mean, I have plenty of conversations where what my clients suspect is their way of relaxing and being in ventral, is like sitting in a first-person shooter game and blowing shit up. And like, your nervous system is not in recharging battery mode. You are artificially creating excitement at a very high threat level that is highly addictive, but not relaxing. No matter what you tell yourself, that's not what's happening. So, I mean, the discovery or the sort of the sobering reality that so many of us spend relatively little time in the happy place, and that many of us even have sort of big do not enter signs where being safe and being in connection is so out of the comfort zone that it feels threatening again. So when our baseline is at a relatively high level of vigilance or anxiety, yeah, it gets in the way of actually making connection. And in no other context, I have not found another way of bringing that to people's attention. And suddenly, with this little diagram and this 3-step ladder and you know, talking about co-regulation, I am in a very different conversation, and they suddenly realize, like, oh yeah, I can't sit still on the sofa. I go out of my mind. Yeah, and then I can talk about meditation and like allowing the discomfort and comfort zone and how we stretch out of our comfort zones. And living in a safe world is out of the comfort zone of an astonishing amount of people, particularly if they're willing to make the personal sacrifices that are required to climb the ladder in corporations and end up at senior levels, like Tom mentioned. Yeah, I mean, the kind of self-sacrifice and self-cruelty that is occurring is kind of hard to watch as a coach.
Yeah.
And I start using this language with them, and I'm always waiting, like, are they dropping me now or are they coming back? and every so often I lose someone where it's like, I'm not ready for this conversation.
Yeah, powerful stuff. Other questions for Volker?
Or maybe it just occurred to me, yeah, there's this book about leading from the back of the room. That is essentially leading, allowing our nervous system to have an impact.
Mm-hmm. There was a comment on the chat, Volker, about what do you think the impact that the pandemic has had on our nervous system? Do you have any thoughts there?
Oh yeah, sure. I can opine all day. I mean, for starters, in my own experience, I lived by myself. And suddenly I went without any co-regulation. And self-regulation only goes so far. So how then do we create in a virtual context, yeah, a sense of community, a place where we can be vulnerable and let our guards down and allow ourselves to be carried by others. And boy, there were some dark weeks when that started out, and that's dorsal. So in dorsal, yeah, in that dark spot, that's isolation. And depending on, you know, how isolation or loneliness lives in our nervous system just through our history, boy, that all just went through the roof. And then we started doing it collectively, where everybody was on edge, and you go into the grocery store and everybody is scared of everybody else, and, you know, do we have the right distance, and you're being too close and you're invading my space, and yeah, suddenly all that was supercharged because I could die. And that's dorsal again. Yeah, dorsal is our last step, where we just check out so that by the time we die, it doesn't hurt so bad. Yeah, that's the deer in the headlight. Just freezes and can't move anymore. And we've done that collectively in a fairly synchronized way. Yeah, and so it is no wonder that social unrest, climate change concerns, we project these fundamental human needs everywhere into our environment, and then sort of they become a lot more pronounced and a lot more important. So the stakes have gotten a lot higher and our support systems a lot weaker. That's the pandemic in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it's a collective thing. So I'm extremely curious how children, yeah, in their formative years, like below 6, yeah, like that's going to be a very clearly identifiable generation in terms of the patterns and behaviors that we will start seeing in their 20s and 30s.
Mhm.
That'll be a cohort.
Yeah. Well, we are 1 minute away from 8 o'clock, and this meetup is, and just, thank you to folks.